hot water in the kettle gives off water vapor to the air by rapid evaporation, just as rivers, lakes, and ponds give off water vapor to the air by slow evaporation. As the hot water-filled air hits the colder air near the ice tray, the water vapor turns into clouds of tiny water droplets floating in the air, condensation. When the air is quite cold and cannot hold any more water droplets, they collect together to form larger drops, as on the ice tray. And being too heavy to float in the air, they fall back to the earth as rain.
This is Vincent Schaefer speaking. I would like to take you into the laboratory and show you a few of the experiments that led us to our outdoor experiments in converting clouds into snow. Using a home freezing unit such as this, which has a temperature of around 0 Fahrenheit, we can form supercool clouds just like those in the natural atmosphere by breathing into the box. The moist air from the breath condenses and forms a cloud, and this cloud cools to a temperature of about 0 degrees Fahrenheit in a few seconds. Any moist thing placed in this box will produce such a cloud. By putting this cloud in the chamber, we can then do various things to it to see whether or not we can convert this supercool cloud to snow. This cloud is made up of liquid water droplets. They are not snow crystals as yet, but by taking a tiny piece of dry ice such as this and scratching it so a few tiny fragments fall into the supercool cloud, long streaks develop just like the vapor trail from an airplane. These contain millions and millions of tiny submicroscopic snow crystals which grow very fast and assume exactly the same forms that natural snowflakes show in an ordinary snowstorm. The particles grow very fast. They grow about 1 billion-fold in volume in a few seconds. And if it were possible to keep them supported in the air, they would grow very large, just like the snow crystals that fall from the sky on a cold winter's day. By applying more moisture to the cloud, the particles grow, since the water droplets evaporate over onto the ice crystals. We say that the vapor pressure of water is higher than the vapor pressure of ice crystals. Therefore, the water all disappears onto the ice crystals. The ice crystals that you see here are scintillating, and the colors are produced by the fact that they're tiny prisms and separate light into its various colors. By just swinging a piece of paper through the chamber, we can remove the cloud of snow crystals and go right back and form another supercool cloud, such as you see me doing here. Then, this time, I'm going to just take a small, ordinary sewing needle, cooled below minus 35 degrees centigrade, and pass it briefly through the cloud. When I do this, again, many millions of snow crystals form, and we get the same effect as is produced by dry ice. Dry ice is not particularly important as far as the fact that it's CO2. It's primarily important because the use of it is primarily important because it's colder than minus 35 degrees centigrade. The scintillations of the crystals cause them to appear round in the camera or in the photograph because they tumble around and therefore draw circular areas. They're actually tiny hexagonal plates and tiny hexagonal columns, just like those which form in the high levels of the atmosphere. After they've been in the chamber for a short time, since they're growing very rapidly, they fall out. Here you see a close-up of these very beautiful twinkling crystals, and they are very beautiful to see. They're not flying saucers, they're just ordinary snow crystals, which are scintillating in the very brilliant light and settling toward the bottom of the box. The size of them is the order of 5/1000ths of an inch. Mostly hexagonal plates in this case, very much like these. These are some which I photographed that were formed in the laboratory. This is a picture of the first cloud that we seeded back last November. Flying in a small Fairchild plane and putting dry ice from a small dispenser in the bottom of the plane, we put about 6 pounds of dry ice into this 4-mile cloud, and within a very few minutes saw long streamers of snow falling from the base of the cloud and evaporating into the drier air below. Under many conditions, of course, full-fledged snowstorms will be produced in this way. Nature at last has permitted to do a little something about the weather.
sanctam subit, qui infernum confregit, ancincus est potentia, surrexit die tertia. Surrexit Christus, et illuxit populo suo, quem redemit sanguine suo. Crucem sanctam subit, qui infernum confregit, acinctus est potentia, surrexit die tertia. Surrexit Christus, iam non moritur, mas illic ultra non dominabitur. Crucem sanctam subit, qui infernum confregit, acinctus est potentia, surrexit die tertia. Pro
Dr. Agnew experienced the power of ELF waves firsthand back in the 1980s. He was hired by an energy company to locate oil and gas using the same kind of ELF waves at much lower frequencies to carry out his search. It's a process called Earth tomography. But during one particular incident, Dr. Agnew believes his use of HAARP-like ELF waves accidentally triggered an earthquake.
It was in the spring of 1987 we arrived in Roseburg, Oregon to use our ELF technology to search for oil and gas. Setting up that day, we had a little bit different results than we expected because the instant that we energized it, there was between a 4 and 4.5 on the Richter scale earthquake that occurred. We were so amazed about what seemed to be cause and effect. We get to an area that has a high propensity for earthquakes in an area known as the megathrust of the Pacific Northwest. We turn it on and an earthquake occurs.
Dr. Agnew demonstrates how he may have triggered the quake.
This is a scale model of what the area looked like in Oregon when we scanned for oil and gas in 1987. The strata right here represents the megathrust area underneath the ground. The rock represents the potential energy set up in the ground from a tectonic stress. What we're going to do is introduce ELF waves and demonstrate that it can in fact trigger an earthquake.
In this case, Dr. Agnew is using a stereo speaker to produce the ELF waves needed for his demonstration.
ELF waves, extremely low frequency waves, are just like a subwoofer. In your car, you can actually feel the vibrations through your body. ELF waves are the same way. They vibrate the earth, and at right resonant frequencies, they can have devastating effects.
When the speaker is activated, ELF waves begin to emit. Tiny vibrations in the sand are detected. Then a few seconds later, the rock representing a fault line shifts.
As you can see, in a very few seconds, the resonant frequency built up in our model released the potential energy in the rock. That concussion, on a real scale, would have been felt for 100 miles. These conditions are already set up in the ground. All it takes is the activation energy to make the release happen. This is a small scale, and we're only using 30 watts in this scale.
When HAARP's broadcast array in Gakona, Alaska sends pulses of ELF waves into the ionosphere, the waves get reflected back down and pass through the Earth and ocean. If 3.6 million watts of ELF waves were purposely or accidentally aimed at an already unstable fault line, it could, according to Dr. Agnew, cause a tremendous earthquake.